Okay, we're ready.
I have to unmute myself. Okay, welcome everyone to today's Knowledge Exchange. I'm Liz Pohland. I'm STC CEO and moderator for our panel today. And I'm joined by Erin Galilee, Director of Membership and Community Relations, and our distinguished panelists. Today's session is titled How to Build Your Network and Promote Your Professional Brand. And we're going to be focusing on what you need to know about creating a professional brand and how to further your career and your network. Joining me today are the panelists, who are Alyssa Fox, Kelly Schrank, and Ben Woelk. And I'm going to read a few brief bios about them and introduce them while Erin prepares a poll for attendees to take so that we can understand who's in the room today. So Alyssa Fox is a marketing leader and content strategist who thrives on improving customer and partner experience through strong relationships and tailored marketing strategies. With extensive experience in technical and marketing content, Alyssa has a passion for leveraging content as a business asset to drive demand, revenue, and customer retention. Alyssa is a member of STC and the American Marketing Association and past STC president. She speaks at conferences around the world about various leadership strategy, marketing, and content topics. She loves traveling, reading good grammar, eating slow, and driving fast. I love that little tidbit. Welcome, Alyssa. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Kelly Schrank has been in technical and medical communication for over 20 years. Through her business, Bookworm Editing Services, she brings consistency, structure, and clarity to her clients' content, regardless of whether she is writing content like blog posts, style guides, and standard operating procedures, or editing formulary dossiers, manuscripts, proposals, slide decks, and training materials. Kelly is an STC Associate Fellow and a Bell Certified Editor in the Life Sciences. Kelly has presented on checklists, Microsoft Word and PowerPoint, editing, infographics, side gigs, and networking in webinars and conferences. Welcome, Kelly.
Thank you.
And last but not least is Ben Woelk, who is a certified information systems security professional and a certified professional technical communicator, as well as an STC Associate Fellow and past president. Ben is Governance, Awareness, and Training Manager in the Information Security Office at Rochester Institute of Technology, where he's responsible for content strategy, security awareness, and program management. Ben teaches RIT courses in cybersecurity policy and law, technical writing, and introverts and leadership. His Hope for the Introvert podcast shares conversations with and about introverted leaders, their strengths, and how they apply them in the workplace and other parts of life. Welcome, Ben.
Thank you.
Thanks to all three of you for being with us today. Erin, do you want to share the poll for panelists for the speak? We'd just like to understand who's in the room today. This gives us an idea of who's attending this session, and it might help the panelists tailor their questions, answers to my questions. So if you don't
Can
mind.
I just say something about the bios that everybody has? I feel like these are good examples of branding. Like, what if we put out there is who we are and what we do and what we think we're known for, what we hope to be known for as technical communicators.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Kelly. Thanks for bringing that up. I think that's something everyone should have who is interested in creating their own brand or a network, is at least a 3-sentence description of who they are for the world like this. And some people don't ever put them together until they're asked to do it. But I think it's, like, for example, on a LinkedIn profile, there's an area for that. And I think it's, they are all three really great examples. And yet I know all three of you really well. And I know you all do a lot more than just what was in that. So I'm going to give you a second. In a second, I'm going to give you a chance to tell us a little more about yourselves. Okay, looks like about half the folks have filled out the poll. So looking at the responses, it looks to me like we have quite a diverse group. We have some STC members, but we have a lot that are not, which is fine. This isn't necessarily about STC. This is more about networking as a technical communicator. But welcome to everyone. This session is open to anyone who wants to attend. The member benefits is helpful to us because that also helps us let you all know what we might want to mention. Career levels, we have quite a few Techcom professionals and some people transitioning, which is pretty usual for these panels. And then the last question helps us decide what else to do in these these open knowledge exchange panels. So thank you. Erin, you want to publish the results so everyone else can see? So it's a diverse group, which I think is great. People are still introducing themselves, which is wonderful. So Erin, have I forgotten anything I was supposed to do before I get into my questions?
Nope, I think we're doing okay. I will be sharing links throughout, references that the panelists may make to places on the website, and also LinkedIn profiles. So just keep an eye on the chat for those types of connections.
Great. All right, let's get going then. So panelists, please introduce yourselves and tell us how you started networking or building a personal or professional brand for yourself. Did you need a brand before you started networking, or can you do both simultaneously, or is it sort of a chicken and egg situation? Ben, I'll start with you.
Sure. Introducing myself a little bit. Yes, I'm Ben Woelk. Did not start off in Techcom, but I'm not sure if anyone here actually did. But I was in a doctoral program and was not making progress in that. And during that time, my spouse put together a technical writing firm, and I started going to work for her. And 20 years later, I'm still doing, it's more than 20 years at this point, still doing technical writing, technical communication, but I'm in a cybersecurity practice. The branding networking thing is an interesting question for me. I actually started doing LinkedIn initially with the networking because I had read Malcolm Gladwell's Blink book. And one of the profiles he presented in there was someone who I suspect was an introvert, but who had worked very hard to build a network just to be able to connect people to one another. And that was really what my initial reason for creating the network was. The other pieces have all been around specific things I've been doing. When I was working on creating, helping build the STC scholarship program, I worked very hard to connect with academics at different universities, so I'd be able to spread information about the scholarship program. I've done the same thing in terms of, I'm a CPTC trainer, so I will use LinkedIn as a platform to let people know about those opportunities coming up. I do security awareness education. I post information there. I share presentations there. I share blog posts there. And I also have a Hope for the Introvert podcast where I've shared those episodes there as well. So I would say it's really been kind of twofold. I have deliberately put together the network. It's somewhere around 4,400 connections, I think, on LinkedIn at this point, all of whom I do not know personally or well. But it's given me an opportunity that when I chat with people, especially interested in coming into the field, that I'm able to make connections for them and connect them through LinkedIn with different people. So that was why I got on LinkedIn. The branding piece is interesting to me because I've got like multiple brands because I'm active in multiple industries. And information security, I'm known as a security awareness professional, and I teach courses and workshops on that. STC, I'm known as a technical communicator, and also I've got the introverted leadership piece. So I'm really using LinkedIn as a platform to really expand all of those pieces of a brand, but I don't think I can answer which came first. So.
Oh, I understand. Sometimes it's hard to go back and realize which you did first if you've been doing it for a long time. Okay, Alyssa, I'll go back next to you.
Sure, thanks, Liz. So I am a VP of channel marketing for a cybersecurity company. So I started my career in Techcom and sort of made my way over to marketing through content strategy. So I'm fully sitting in a marketing department. I do not do Techcom day to day, but I do interact with our Techcom team. And it's been an interesting journey, and I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit more as we get into the branding and networking and how I got here. But as far as the question between branding or networking coming first of all, I do think you can do both simultaneously. I think you have to do both simultaneously. But I also feel like you do need somewhat of a personal brand before you start networking. Or how do you know whom, whichever, to go build your network with? If you don't know who you are and what you're trying to accomplish, you can build a network, but it won't be an effective network. So the way that I sort of went about it is similar to Ben, starting out in certain groups. STC is one, American Marketing Association is another, perhaps meetup groups that you might go to so you can meet people, whether virtually or in person, and starting to determine, will this person be a good connection for me and what I'm trying to accomplish long term, what I'm trying to accomplish short term. Is it someone that I can help or help mentor or grow, and then going from there. So that's how I've built up my network. And then, of course, as you go meet people, then, getting them to introduce you to other people. But I think if you're not very clear on what your personal brand is, whether you have one or four, and really you have, in my opinion, you have one personal brand, you just have different aspects of it, like Ben was describing for sure. I think you need to be pretty clear on where you're trying to go, maybe not every aspect of it defined, but so that you can build an effective network rather than just a collection of people that you might talk to occasionally.
That's great. Thanks, Alyssa. Really good advice. And Kelly.
Hi, Kelly Schrank, Bookworm Editing Services. And I think probably why I started with the brand is because I knew I wanted to build a business for myself. And the networking goes hand in hand with that. It does help for you to know who you are when you go, trying to meet people. But I also really welcome the serendipity of like, I don't know what this person can do for me or what I can do for this person, and just meeting random people at at STC events. Or I'm also involved in the American Medical Writers Association because I do a lot of medical editing. So just kind of, I guess I have a little broader, like I'm not quite so strategic about it. Like I just kind of see what's out there, and I've gotten some cool projects for my business because of it. I just think it opens you up to different kinds of opportunities, whether it's, personal or professional, a lot of volunteer things, or, writing for Intercom, or, just kind of interesting things that you can do with yourself that maybe they'll help you, maybe they won't. I don't know, but sometimes it's fun to just kind of stretch yourself in different ways. And I feel like that with networking as well, like you have to stretch yourself just to go out there and meet new people and, get to know them and see what they're doing.
Thank you. All right, so my next question is, what advice can you provide to those just starting to build a brand? And I'm sure that not everyone in the room is never been on social media or anything like that, but if they were like intentionally building a brand, where and how should they start, especially if they are uncomfortable with, quote, putting themselves out there? What foundation should they have built before building their network? And I'll start with Alyssa this time.
So I think for me, the clearest point that will help you build the brand that you need is really understanding your unique value proposition. There's a lot of technical communicators out in the world. There's a lot of marketing people. There's a lot of insert blank, insert here. So figuring out what makes you unique in that sea of candidates if you're doing a job search, and your sea of coworkers if you're looking for some sort of fun opportunity or cool opportunity within your company is essential. And that takes time. It takes time that you have to sit down and think about it. It takes a lot of thought. It's what is the intersection of what I can do and what I'm really good at, and what this opportunity / job / person is looking for. And I think that's really the foundation of everything from that point forward: your brand, your network, the way you present yourself on social media. So that's really the essential part for me. I think once you figure that out, your unique value prop and why you're different than the other technical communicators out there, then you have to communicate that in a way that really shows that.
That's great. Great response. Thank you. Ben, how about you?
Yeah, it's again, it's an interesting thing. I would say, and I'll draw out especially against around people who are changing into the profession, right? So I talked to a number of people over the last year, just through the CPTC courses, or people who are just interested and want to know more about Techcom, and I'm happy to talk to them. And I think part of the thing in terms of the brand there, even in LinkedIn, is think about where you want to be and what you want to be doing. LinkedIn is not, it's not like a resume. In almost a lot of ways, it is a marketing piece for yourself. And if there are areas you want to move into, you should have those in your LinkedIn profile. I think I found that part to be pretty key. And a lot of it also, even if you're coming into the field from outside of Techcom, is thinking about the work that you've done and reframing it so that it is technical communication and that you describe it as such. And that's not going to be your job titles necessarily that you're listing either. LinkedIn is, I found it really good in terms of connecting as is what it's intended to, but it's also interesting because I know when they first put LinkedIn together, and I thought it was primarily going to be people connecting who knew each other. And I think it's changed from that. And now you were looking for affinity groups and what are other people interested in? Are they interested in similar things? Why not connect? Right. So I've looked at it a little bit like that.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you. And Kelly.
Yeah, I have to agree with starting out on LinkedIn and learning how to talk about yourself to distinguish yourself from other people, like Alyssa and Ben have been saying. I also think it's helpful if you don't quite know what you want to do yet, like talking about some of the people who aren't quite in the career yet, is to look at the job titles, the job descriptions, the jobs that are out there, and what do they need, and what are they asking for, and what can you put in your profile that you're interested in, and also to help you to figure out how you want to go where you want to go. Like, do you want to be, working in certain software besides like Microsoft Word, which I talk about a lot? Like, you want to learn some of the cool, content management software out there, or you want to go into data or that kind of stuff like that. Knowing what kind of jobs are interesting to you based on what you see on LinkedIn is a good way to figure out who you want to talk to and get to know, and also what you might want to learn and what some of the opportunities are for that. It's great that you've all found STC. This is a great place to start with your networking and education, but LinkedIn is also really helpful that way, I think.
So you've all alluded to it, that, obviously having a brand or a network is important for job hunting. So, and if you've been on an interview recently, you know that most employers probably are looking at our networks and profiles online, deciding whether they want to hire us. So it's not just about a resume anymore. So why is a personal professional brand and network important for every technical communicator to have, or for any other opportunity somebody might be looking for? Is networking or building a brand just for job hunting, or are there other reasons to do this? And for this one, I'll start with Ben.
Sure. So interesting question around this. So is it just for job hunting? For me, no. And honestly, I think I have consciously tried to develop expertise in various areas. And one way to share that expertise is on LinkedIn. And the idea, I'm not necessarily sharing just to say, oh, look what Ben's put out there, but trying to find information that's valuable for other people and to share it is a good portion of what I'm trying to do. The other thing I would say, though, is that whether you're trying to build a brand or not, you have a brand. If you're active on social media, you have a brand. And what it is, the impression people are going to form of you. And what I would say in terms of the branding, and we didn't really talk about this when we chatted about the conversation previously, is that you want to be really positive in terms of what you're putting on these profiles, whether it's LinkedIn or something else. I look at when we're interviewing candidates and I'm looking at their social media, I'm really looking for red flags. But I'm also very encouraged when I see that someone has listed a good chunk of what kinds of things they're done, what they're interested in, who their connections are. That connection part becomes very, very important. Whether you're looking for a job or not, a lot of it is, well, who do I need to talk to about this? And if you've got the connections, you know where their expertise are or their expertise is. And it's a great way to get questions answered or to help people with questions they might have as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Ben. I think, as a hiring manager myself, I think when you look at somebody's LinkedIn, their social media profiles, you get a better sense of who they are as a person. Because what you usually get from like a job description or a resume, that cover letter, is just what's applicable to that job. But you can decide whether you even want to bring them in on an interview from that more well-rounded out information. And I think you have a very good point about positivity. and red flags, because that is one of the things that will absolutely knock you out of a pile of candidates if you have a bunch of negative stuff on your LinkedIn or social media profile. The other thing I wanted to point out is, there are headhunters on these social media platforms as well. And sometimes, maybe you guys, somebody else can talk to this, sometimes jobs may come to you as a result of already having a good profile out there. So I'll move next to Alyssa and let her address this.
Yeah, you might have to cut me off because I have a lot to say about this one. So, we're talking about the LinkedIn profile, and that's absolutely essential. But there's other things you can be doing on LinkedIn and other social media to enhance your brand and build your brand. And whether you're somebody that's just coming into Techcom and straight out of school, or you're trying to transition careers mid-career, or you've got 30 years of experience. And that is, engagement. Because if you're not engaging, you can have a fantastic LinkedIn profile. And if you're not engaging with other people on LinkedIn, if you're not ever putting anything out there that shows your expertise, like Ben was talking about, you can write, you have the capability on LinkedIn to write articles, to share posts, to share, other content, video content and stuff. And as a hiring manager myself, like Liz, I'm always looking for proactive people that are constantly learning. I hire for attitude. If you don't know a tool, I can teach you a tool. But if I see that you're proactively engaging with other professionals on LinkedIn, or even Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, whatever you do, any or all of the above, that's important to me. Now, for the non-job search piece, I think it's absolutely essential that you have a network at all times. Networking is not you grow it and then it sits there. It is you grow it and you maintain it and you trim it and you make it bloom. And that's because even if you're not looking for a job, you can have a fantastic opportunity within your organization. Maybe you've never worked on any kind of cross-functional project before, and something's coming up, and you're the one that's visible. You're the one that's building the network, both internally and externally from your company. And that makes you kind of pop up to the top of the list for some kind of cool opportunity within your company. Volunteer opportunities. I've been approached about being on the board of a nonprofit before because of my LinkedIn connections and profile. Meeting people that could possibly help you with a job search down the line. There's all kinds of reasons to have that network and maintain that network besides just a job search. Ultimately, I think most people do it for the job search, but there's all those other things that can lead into people thinking of you if you are looking later. So I think that's pretty important. The other thing I would say is putting yourself out there, as I mentioned on LinkedIn, really enhances what you're trying to do. And as far as non-professional or personal social media sites and the red flags, it's also about how you present yourself when communicating. Even if you don't have a negative, rant about something political or religious or something, all those topics, taboo topics on Twitter, for example, the way that you communicate, both personal and professional ideas, projects, expertise sharing is going to be key, especially for a communications role, which is what we're talking about.
Yeah, very good advice. And I think that a lot of people at one point when social networks started coming out thought they could keep these things separate. And that's really not the case anymore. And another red flag that I often see is when people have no social network on these sites. If you're just internally only connecting with the people in your company or your friends and family, then something's, you're not engaging in the way Alyssa and Ben have alluded to, and you're not trying to learn more about or reach out beyond what you already have access to, which I think is important. All right, Kelly, your turn.
Yes. So I'll echo a lot of the themes that I've heard, and just add what I kept thinking about as Ben and Alyssa were talking, is that when you have an active presence, you're like a warm lead. And I feel like when people are not on social media and they're not, all you get is a resume, like to me, that's like a cold lead. You don't get a good feel for somebody. There's not that kind of warmth I feel like that you can get from like, oh, I see who this person is. I see who she is based on, what I see on her profile. I see who he is based on his, what he's doing on Slack or what he's doing on social media, like whatever. Like to me, it makes you seem more like a real person that somebody would want to work with, as opposed to just, this piece of paper that has a name and some, some different kind of things on it. So that was kind of what came forward to me as we were talking. And I had other things and they completely slipped my mind. So
That's fine, because there's a question in the chat right now that
Okay.
is especially appropriate for you since you have your own business.
I do have, yeah.
Asking about being connected with as an individual, which seems to be no problem, but her company page doesn't get any traction. Is a company page useful, and how is it different? Do you have some recommendations there?
Yeah, I think it's fine that your personal is good. I have, a company page for my company as well. It doesn't get as many people following it as my personal does, and it doesn't get as many people commenting on it. So I think it's just a matter of, again, that personal touch. Like somebody wants to connect with me, they don't really necessarily want to connect with the business. It's different, I feel like, than Instagram or Facebook, where sometimes you want to, like a company page or something. It's a different situation. So I feel like it's different. I don't get all caught up in it. I have not as many connections as Ben, but I have a good number of connections. So to me, that's not a big deal.
Yeah, and Alyssa said that it helps if people in your network or in your company continue to promote and share that page. So, but I think you're right. If you're the owner of the company, it's important that people know who you are and see your LinkedIn profile as well. So
I think, Liz, really quickly, I think there are a couple of things on that. One, we are able to see who works with whom sometimes in terms of being on LinkedIn, right? And the company page, I think, will list that, in terms of who's affiliated with the company. But again, what is the purpose of that company page? Are you trying to establish a presence? Are you trying to provide value? Are you providing information? Are you providing articles, things like that would draw people to the page? I mean, that's what I would look at, I think, generally. And professionally, I am not connected with every company page, or do not follow every company page of people I'm connected with, but there's some that are vendors that we work with, and I absolutely follow because I want to see what they're posting about. But again, it always comes to what content are they sharing?
yeah, I think that's a very good bit of advice, that you have to, if you're creating a LinkedIn profile for a business, you really should have a plan behind why you're doing that. And then we have another question about whether we should have two LinkedIn profiles, one for sort of your personal use, one for your business. And Alyssa, I see you've responded to it. Do you want to speak more to that?
Sure.
I think you can only be one person though, anyways, right?
Yes,
Well,
but a minute ago, I mentioned that you could, that these worlds are colliding and that one LinkedIn profile might address multiple things. I think in the beginning, people kept it very separate, thinking they could have a LinkedIn profile about their hobbies and one about maybe their business stuff. But maybe that's not advisable any longer.
Yeah,
It would be really messy.
Yeah, I just noted in the chat that I think that could become confusing, especially nowadays in a mostly virtual world, thanks to COVID. We don't always have the luxury of meeting people face to face, and having two different profiles with very similar names or almost similar skills could potentially be, disruptive to your brand. I also think there's value in showing how your skills on both sides of the house, for in this example, senior tech editor and then published author, essayist, etc. There's value in showing all of those skills together, because if you do your personal branding correctly, you can show how a set of skills that you learned in one environment could very well be applicable in another environment. And the reason I'm saying that is because that's how I moved into marketing. I showed how my foundational skills that I learned in Techcom could be applicable in marketing. And if I had a whole separate Techcom profile and a separate marketing profile, it's not as impactful, I think, for me to say, hey, I've done all these kinds of roles, and here's how what I learned in those roles can apply to what you're looking for in this role, this opportunity, this particular project.
So Alyssa, you've addressed something that someone wrote to me privately because she doesn't want to share this this question to the whole group. But someone's asked if there's any advice on LinkedIn for someone who's trying to transition into Techcom while still employed in another profession. So it's a little bit sticky, right? You don't want to put up there that you're looking for a job, but how do you and maybe you've already somewhat addressed this, how do you telegraph that you've got the skills for this profession while still working maybe in another?
Yeah, that's, that's the great thing about communication in my viewpoint, because communication is such a broad category that you can easily tailor your profile to talk about various types of communication without kind of giving away the secret that you're looking for a job. Now, I will say too, that there is a setting on LinkedIn that you can indicate to recruiters that you are looking for a job. It does not do anything publicly on your profile. Recruiters actually use a whole separate tool called LinkedIn Recruiter or LinkedIn Recruiting something, where they can see people that have flipped switches like that and put those settings on. So you can indicate to those recruiters that you're looking for a job without anyone knowing publicly that you are. So that's one thing I would advise. But I think really being able to talk about the various types of communication you do and give example, perhaps you're, for, in my case, say you're in marketing and cybersecurity, which I am, but you're trying to get into Techcom in the medical industry. I think you can look at what you've done in communication, because there's marketing communication that can be technical in nature, that you can talk about, that you have experience in marketing communications, technical communications across multiple industries, and any volunteer work that you might have done or could sign up to do to help you move towards that would be helpful.
Yeah, Alyssa, that's exactly what I was going to recommend is, STC has a lot of special interest groups and other smaller groups where you could maybe go volunteer in an area that won't be a threat to your current position, but gets you the expertise and allows you to list something on your resume or your LinkedIn profile that says you are interested in this area and you do have experience with that. That's great. So I think, I'll move on to my next question, because I think you've already sort of started talking about it here, which is, are there any particular tools that are critical to building a network? And are there ways that you should be searching for like-minded colleagues or people who have of interest opportunities that you might want to take advantage of? Alyssa, I'm going to start with you because you've already started talking about LinkedIn, and I know you are a big advocate of a paid version of LinkedIn, correct?
Right. So I do pay for LinkedIn Premium, even when I am not job hunting. And that helps tremendously, first of all, for job hunting, if you are job hunting, but it gives you so many insights into different companies and their makeup of employees, their growth patterns, where they're investing, news about those companies that you don't necessarily see with just plain free LinkedIn. And the reason I use that is because as I build and maintain my network, I like to know what companies are up and coming and why they're up and coming. And those insights provided by Premium really help with that. Now, when you're job hunting, it's also hugely helpful. It will tell you if you're looking at a particular job, how many people have applied through LinkedIn for that job and which ones have the same qualifications as you based on your LinkedIn profile. You also don't get that kind of insight when you're on the free site. Another tool that I'd add real quick before you move on is, you can go beyond LinkedIn. When I was networking for a new job, my last job hunt, I had subscriptions to my local city's business journal and also watching the news on various sites, in my case for technology, that sort of thing. That was really helpful because it helped me see things like what companies were getting new rounds of funding, if they were, early to mid-stage startups, which ones were moving to my city. At the time, it was important what city you were in, right? Because not everything was virtual like it is now. And just keeping up to date with the news about these companies, because that helped me then contact various leaders at those companies and say, hey, I noticed that you guys just got another round of funding. And according to this article in the Houston Business Journal, y'all plan to invest that in sales and marketing. Are you going to be hiring new leaders? I'm really interested in any roles that have to do with this. So even though there were not posted jobs, that gave me the opportunity to reach out. And at the time, I actually did that with 5 chief marketing officers and had coffee with 4 of them. And ended up getting interviews with a couple of them and got very close to a role with one of them. So even though you may not be job hunting or you may not get a job with them, you have that connection for later. You're top of mind that you reached out and actually approached them if they do have a role later. And you just get some cool people in your network. So if you want to shoot ideas around with someone later, that helps you build your network.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant, Alyssa. I'm sure they were very impressed when you came in and knew more about the business than they would expect. So that's very cool. Ben, how would you respond, or what tools do you use or recommend?
So it's interesting because we talked primarily about LinkedIn, and I think Alyssa's point about making sure you're basically in the know in the industry you're trying to get into is very, very important. What we haven't really touched on is LinkedIn does have groups. And I think that the groups and their affinity groups typically, and I think it's going to be one of these, your mileage will vary depending on the group, but some groups are quite active in their ways to build connections. They tend to be large groups of people. I do want to mention two other tools. One is Reddit. Now, I'm at Rochester Institute of Technology, and RIT has its own, what they call a subreddit, which is students being very vocal about all sorts of things. But in addition to that, there's a technical writing subreddit also. And I've started engaging on that one. There's very little said about STC in general on there. And I've chatted with people about it a little bit. But it's also, you get a lot of people asking about, well, how do I find out about salaries? What's the appropriate job? That sort of thing. And today, as I mentioned, before we started our program, there was an Australian technical writer asking, well, what's the industry like in Australia? And our current STC president, Kirsty Taylor, is Australian. So I am making an attempt to connect that person with Kirsty. And, you have an automatic, you're able to help someone connect with someone who can help them. The other area, and I think Kelly's probably going to chat on this quite a bit too, is Slack. I have been a big proponent of Slack since 2016, I guess. We had mentioned that I do the introverted leadership, Hope for the Introvert podcast. What I did when I started speaking on introverted leadership in 2016 is create a Slack workspace or Slack community where we could chat about introverted leadership issues. And I would say it's probably languished a bit at this point, but it's been sitting there for 6 years almost. And we had well over 200 people sign up for it almost immediately because we wanted an opportunity to be able to speak safely about like-minded issues where we had questions. So Slack has been great for that. And I'm really excited about how well the STC Slack community has taken off from thinking about it a few years ago that we need to do it. And I know it's going to be close to 1,000 members right now. So that's absolutely awesome. But I will yield to Kelly because I think she wants to talk about Slack a little bit as well.
I would say I'm gonna say LinkedIn again. And I agree with the groups, going to the groups that make sense for you. Slack, the STC Slack is pretty busy. I'm in other Slacks for other organizations that I belong to, and you just kind of never know what's going to come up. Somebody might ask, about the work. They might ask, does anybody have a job? They might offer a job. So I think the Slacks can be really interesting for the different groups that you belong to. I'll mention again, somebody was saying, knowing what to charge is important. This is where I leave myself open to work and let recruiters call me because it'd be hard to ask a company like, well, what's the rate for that? But a recruiter, they're going to tell you right off the bat, and it kind of gives you a way to get an idea of what companies are actually paying out there. So that, and just getting involved with organizations that make sense, like STC, if that's where you're trying to get into Techcom, going to the conferences. Right now, they're virtual. It makes it easier. It's cheaper. Just, a chance to get to know other people and find out what they're working on and get some ideas for what you might want to do if you're new to this. I think that was all I was gonna go too deep into it.
That's great. No, Kelly, thank you. And the other thing I'll mention that STC has, if you're a member, is our salary database that we put out annually that does talk about the geographical areas of the United States and what companies are hiring technical communicators and how much they're paying. It's just been published. We had a webinar about it. We're going to have another webinar about it in March. So if you haven't looked at that and you're a member, I highly recommend that as another tool. Another question I have for you guys, it's not one of the questions we talked about, but I've been sitting here thinking about it, is when building a network or certainly a profile of some kind, do any of you or have any of you used any kind of coach or someone who is an expert on this? Or do you ask any of your friends or colleagues for feedback on your profile to, perfect it? I don't know, just jump in if you have. I'm curious.
So I was just responding to Thomas Remington in the chat about this very issue or very
Yeah.
question. We have a colleague in our area named Hannah Morgan who has spoken for the STC Rochester. She actually spoke with me twice at Summit over the year, several years ago. Her specialty has really been branding and LinkedIn, and she has published books about it. She has a blog about it. She has some absurd amount of connections. I think we're talking it's around 6-figure connections at this point in time because her influence has gotten to be that great. But I highly recommend her. She's at careersherpa.net. Great person, but great, and also great advice about what to do in terms of building your LinkedIn profile so it gets you to where you want to be.
Thank you, Ben. And I swear I had the question before Tomas put it in there, but I'm so glad that our synergies were aligned. Alyssa, I saw you come off mute, so I think you want
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I absolutely agree with Hannah. She's fantastic. I follow her and I'm connected to her. I know her as well. And her recommendations are spot on. I would say too, and I've never personally used a coach on any of this. I've sort of built it all myself based on just reading things that are free online and that sort of thing and knowing myself well, I guess. But I did want to say it is still a good idea to have your friends and colleagues, I would say professional and personal people, look at what you're putting out there, because I think sometimes people can become aspirational rather than realistic about what their skills are and what they're trying to put out there as their brand. And it's really useful to have somebody kind of look at that and go, this doesn't sound like you. It needs to be authentic. It needs to be genuine. And something could be accurate and ungenuine, right? In the way that you've communicated it. So I know when I was reworking my entire resume, well, I have several resumes for different, roles and that sort of thing. But when I was reworking all of that in my personal brand, as I was transitioning careers, I had some 2 or 3 friends, as well as 2 or 3 colleagues and a mentor look at it. So the people I felt like really knew me best, so they could say, yeah, but you're not even calling out what you do so well in this area, or you're kind of overemphasizing on this. So it's really good to have those multiple second sets of eyes on it.
Yeah, I agree with you, Alyssa. It's sometimes hard to get outside of yourself and see what you look like to the outside world, and having other people give you that advice or point out something you may absolutely be forgetting to mention because you think of it as something not critical, but everyone else does. I think that's a very good point.
Well, and yeah, Liz, too. Sorry. 2 other quick things about the LinkedIn piece. You can have personal recommendations in LinkedIn, which help give people a vignette, at least in terms of how you've worked with someone over time. You've also got the ability to get skills. I'm losing the right word here. Recommendations is not the right word, but you can list a series of skills and you can have people basically affirm whether you add that skill or not. I don't know how important that is, but I do know that if someone is interested in Techcom, and I don't know, if you're new into it, you're not going to have the testimonials or whatever around it. But if I look at somebody's profile and they've got a more than 99 or something in Techcom or something, there's somebody I know, they know the field. I can talk to them. I can find out how do you do specific things. So I think that part's, probably something we're overlooking a little bit.
Yeah, that's a good point. I have definitely sent out to my network, questions saying, hey, would you endorse me? It's endorsements. I think that's your thing.
Thank you.
Endorse me for these skills that I have, or also write me a recommendation on LinkedIn. And I'll admit, as a hiring manager, I do read those. It's interesting to see what other people say about you publicly like that. So I think that's important. So
I did have a question for those of you who have hired about if the LinkedIn looks great and they're everything you're hoping they are, do you even look at the other ones? Do you even look at the other social media? No, do you look at any of the other social media when LinkedIn looks amazing? I just wondered if it might be like, oh, great. And then
we don't want to find out you're a raving lunatic on Twitter, right? So we need to look at Twitter.
Yeah, that and consistency, right? Because somebody can go hire someone to write their LinkedIn profile, but then they look completely sloppy on other social media. I want a consistent person. And I do recognize that people can sometimes compartmentalize themselves sort of between their personal life and their work life, but I want somebody that's the same person through and through. what their personal values are, echo in their work. So yeah, I'm an information hoarder when it comes to people I'm hiring. As much information as I can get, because I want to perform get a well-rounded view.
Yeah, I agree with that. I look at them all, and I have found people who are totally different on LinkedIn versus on all their other social media, and it's caused me to wonder a little bit, and
well, you can pay people to do it. I mean,
and
like we were saying.
I've even in an interview said to somebody, "Why are you so different here as here?" And may put them on the spot to explain it. Anyway, let me move on to another question because we have only 10 minutes left, and I want to make sure we get to all these. Building a network, is it a one and done activity, or do you have to constantly nurture this? And also, someone asked me in a private message, do you have any tips for those who've been maybe not in this workforce for a while who want to come back to it? How would they get their network back up to speed again, or their profile? Kelly, I'll start with you.
I would just start seeing where people are now and connecting with them. A lot of I'm in the pharma industry a lot, and people are moving every year. Like, you can't keep up with where people are. So just a quick, hey, I noticed you're somewhere new. I'm trying to get back into Techcom, whatever. I mean, there's always a way to kind of start up a conversation with somebody and see what they're up to, and just kind of get started, liking people's comments and commenting on their posts and things like that. There's just ways to just kind of put yourself out there and show that you're back in the game.
Yeah, and I assume you don't think it's a one and done activity either.
Oh no. So you see me over here like shaking my head,
Oh yeah,
no,
because
it's a constant.
The changes of the field are so constant that you have to keep up, and you have to keep making sure that what you say about yourself actually reflects, as to Alyssa's point, what you're really doing.
Hopefully you're growing and changing, so you're always having something to talk about.
Great. Ben, how do you respond?
It is absolutely something I want to say constant maintenance and upkeep, but it is not one and done. It's absolutely not one and done. I will update it. I don't like having things that are several years old as the things I'm sharing on LinkedIn. So I try to go through that, because I do have some articles, I have some posts, I have some presentations that I will look at now, says, my gosh, what was I thinking of when I shared that? Because my thoughts have changed on it, or I think that the template itself was just ghastly. So I do try to keep the resources updated. But in terms of getting back in, it's all about the engagement piece. That's what the LinkedIn is such a great tool for. You do get a chance to present yourself in a different way than a resume, but you also get a chance to interact with people who are writing things that you're interested in. Follow the hashtags that you're interested in. And yes, like the posts, but comment on the posts. Maybe they're an opportunity for you to provide information that someone wasn't even thinking about. You don't have to agree with everything you comment on. You want to be respectful.
Don't fight
with it,
with
obviously.
people,
Yeah, you want to be respectful. Absolutely. But engage. I think that's the real key with this, is be engaged with your LinkedIn network, and as you're building that network, it's not just, okay, well, come check me out on LinkedIn. And it's like, okay, that was from 2013.
Yeah. Just to add to that, I was going to say, the whole point of a network, besides knowing people, is being top of mind and being visible and getting out there and putting yourself out there. And you can't do that if you build all this great profile and resume and everything for a job, then nobody hears from you for 10 years. And then you don't contact them again until you need another job. I mean, first of all, the people you're trying to network with get a little irked by that, because it's kind of like, you only talk to me when you need something. And, just that constant engagement, like Ben was talking about, is absolutely essential to keeping that network fresh and alive. I think, if you're not doing something like that, it is literally like a mole going back underground, when you're trying to do something there. The other thing I would mention is, in actually maintaining it and nurturing it, just providing helpful things to people, because it's a reciprocal relationship. It is not about how much help can I get from other people out there. It is also about putting your expertise out there and helping other people. I have this thing that I call the 5-minute help. And whenever somebody contacts me and asks me about something, if it's going to take me 5 minutes or less, even though I'm super busy, I try to do it for them right then. And if I can't do it, I tell them when I can do it, because that stuff comes back to you. You know, you reap rewards from that. You strengthen and enrich your relationship with that person, as well as just, you know, have that stronger network and that ongoing network. And I think that's really essential, because otherwise it's not really a network. It's like a group of people that it's a transaction is what it boils down to.
That's really great advice. I've learned so much from all of you today. I gotta go work on my profile, I'm realizing. So my last question is one that may be a little bit difficult to answer, but I am curious what you all think. Has anything changed about how we network, or the way our networks have evolved because of the pandemic, or as a cause of the pandemic? Are there things we need to think about post-pandemic about our networks and our profiles? Ben, I'll start with you.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm nodding my head vigorously here on that. So what has really changed for us as we've gone virtual and everything is that we have to be so much more intentional about, you know, maintaining contacts, building contacts, checking in with people in general. But I look at this because when we were at conferences or we were at meetings, we bump into each other in the hallway, and you'll have this in your workplace too. And you would have these sidebar conversations. I know we're in this, it seems like we're always in a transitional point with this pandemic at this time. But for when you're working primarily remotely, you don't get those accidental conversations. And one thing that I've done, I've done it a little bit with LinkedIn. I've done it more through Slack in terms of trying to keep up with colleagues or people that I've met at a conference a few years ago. I try to set up recurring Zoom calls with them, because we have to be intentional, or those relationships just drop. And I, think now, even in terms of my workplace, there are people I haven't seen in more than 2 years, face to face, that we used to bump into each other all the time and talk to each other. But I'm trying to build up a good amount of people that I talk to, at least for a few minutes on a monthly basis, to build those relationships. Colleagues at different universities, especially. Some of us, we have weekly 20-minute calls. Some of us, we have a monthly call. But it's just, I would say it's more important now that we've become more virtual as a society and a more virtual workplace, that we absolutely have to have that virtual connectivity, whether it's through LinkedIn, Slack, or Zoom, or something else.
Okay, thank you. Kelly.
But I think in some ways it's opened it up to people who it wasn't open to before, because there's some people for travel reasons wouldn't come to conferences, family reasons couldn't come to conferences, couldn't go to meetings. I feel like we can be in touch with more people, and it's more acceptable because everybody's online. And so I think it makes it better for those who maybe felt a little left out before because they weren't able to travel and see people, that we can now, stay in closer touch with people.
Right. And there's so many ways to do it now too. There's so many platforms for doing this kind of thing. Alyssa, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I see a couple of changes. I think a lot of people are expanding their networks geographically. A lot of people, if they did go into an office every day, or maybe only sort of networked with people in the offices or the locations in which their offices were, or something like that, because we are virtual and worldwide and global, some people by choice, some people not by choice. It's good to expand your network everywhere. It's not limited to the city you live in or the city where your offices are. So I think that's been a big change. And then the other thing I would mention is, because we are all on so many more meetings, virtual calls like this, webinars, whatever, I have looked for additional ways to network without having to be on a video call, because I am on so many for work. I'm talked out. I don't want to talk to anybody else. I don't want to look at anybody else. I don't want to see my own little face in the little, window down at the bottom. So, looking for new ways to network. And it might be, you send an email. There's one person I used to work with. It's probably been 10 years now, and we've just been sending, almost like pen pals. We've been sending emails back and forth to each other. It's asynchronous, but it's kind of cool, because it's like, oh man, I haven't written a letter in a while, So that's one way you can maintain your networks, or sending a piece of content to somebody that might be relevant to them with just a quick little one-liner going, I thought of you when I read this. We have to change the way and the channels that we use to network. It's not so much all about calls anymore, or all about, the face-to-face because of the pandemic.
Yep, I think you're all right on. And I want to go back real quick to a question that Eddie McCam wrote early on that I missed in the chat, which is, what do you do when all of your samples or the information on your profile is out of date, or old samples, old writing samples? And I know we've had a conversation about this in another knowledge exchange where we talked about you can always create new content for your profile, for your portfolio, whether it's based in reality or real work or not. You can always ask for a volunteer job to help somebody make something better. Do you guys have any advice for him about how to update portfolio or samples?
I swear someone on LinkedIn just posted it's Google Days or something. It's like an open source thing where people can volunteer to write things. I wonder if they could use things like that. I mean, we always say open source is a way to do it. I haven't done it because I always manage to find something that's that's publicly facing, but
well, then I don't know that the samples are that important. Okay, if they're several years ago, it's what are you all saying now? How are you demonstrating on LinkedIn that you engage with people, that you have, and frankly, intelligent things to say or good comments on things? I'm going to pay much more attention to, I want to know what you're like now. It's great. I don't think I have a written sample per se on my LinkedIn profile. I have articles and posts and podcast links and things like that are all fairly recent. But I'm not sure I'd worry. I don't even know that the LinkedIn's an appropriate place to share the actual writing samples, but I'm not sure. Alyssa, I'm not sure what your take is on that, but I wouldn't expect to see them there.
Yeah, I usually when I was hiring technical communicators, I would have them write a couple samples for me, fresh. But one thing I would love to see is if you took those old samples, because you're coming back into the industry, right? If you took those old samples, brought them to me and said, I wrote this 10 years ago, but here's how, and I wrote it using this tool in this approach with this way. But now I would do it this way, and that would be awesome to me because it shows you're continually learning. It shows that even though you've been out of Techcom for a while, you know what it takes to come back in. Or even if you don't know everything about how you'd approach it, I think just having that discussion and being proactive and forthcoming about it, that you haven't been there for a while, I would love to see that kind of proactive conversation about it, to say, here's what I did and here's how I would do it differently now, or what I would change and or improve.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And as well, I mean, LinkedIn, your profile itself is a writing sample. Being able to talk about yourself and putting yourself out there like that takes the place of something like that.
And Liz, sorry, I know we're wrapping up, but just one more comment on that. A former mentor or a former boss of mine that is still a mentor to me told me one time that everything is information. So especially in the field that we're in communication, as I alluded to earlier, it is a very broad field. And the emails that you write me when we are interviewing, or your thank you note, or anything like that, the way you present yourself, that's all branding that leads to the way you network and the way that you communicate. And I think keep in mind that people look at that, especially for communication roles.
Yep, that's also a very good point. Thank you, Alyssa.
Well, especially if you think about if you have to interact with SMEs, they're going to want to know how you're going to do that. Sorry.
So we posted all of your LinkedIn profiles earlier in the chat. So if people didn't get their questions answered, feel free to connect with our panelists or me or Aaron or anyone else that you've seen here today that you think could help you, because that's the whole point of networking, and continue the conversation. We'll also have a channel on Slack if you want to continue this any further. Thank you to my panelists. You guys are brilliant on this topic, and I appreciate you being here. And I will pass it back to Aaron to do some housekeeping. This has been recorded, so if you need to leave, feel free to top off, and you can always watch the end at another time. Aaron, back to you.
Thank you, Liz. I am sharing a screen right now. I also shared all of our STC's social media platforms and other networks that you can connect to. So please join us there. There is a list here. There's also a a link just to the STC site where you can create a profile for us and get on our email list, just so you know the things that are coming up and happening with STC. And there's a calendar of events right there on our homepage. You can join in all the activities that are happening with STC. In addition, if you have joined any of the professional networks that Liz had mentioned earlier in the program, our special interest groups or our chapters, they also have social network platforms as well. So make sure you're connecting all the way that you can. And also we would invite you to join us for future, this is all the LinkedIn profile for our contacts and our panelists that are here today, which I also posted in the chat. We also want to invite you to future panel discussions. The next one I think will be good. We'll have a lot of the conversation today alluded to this topic is transitioning to Techcom, which will happen at the end of March. And then there is a content strategy program up for the end of April. And then an exciting new thing is we're going to be live in person at our STC Summit in May, and we're going to take Knowledge Exchange to the summit. So you'll see some panel discussions that will be happening there. But please feel free to join us for upcoming programs, view this recording as well as recordings to past discussions at any point on our Knowledge Exchange panel page, which I just shared in the chat, as well as just connecting to us as any way that you can. And please feel free to connect to any of our LinkedIn profiles, our emails, if you have any questions or concerns. Thank you for joining us today and have a wonderful week.
Thanks, everybody. And thanks to all the kudos in the chat to the panelists. We appreciate you being here today.
Thanks, everybody.